They threw her dress out of the window first. It fell 3 floors and landed in the hotel courtyard, pale cream chiffon, the one Petra had saved 11 months to buy, crumpling against the cobblestones while 22 members of the Voss wedding party watched from the window above and laughed. The bridesmaid who threw it, a woman named Celeste with white blonde hair and a champagne flute in her free hand, called down to the courtyard, "It doesn't fit you anyway, sweetheart." And the laughter got louder. What none of them knew, what Petra Vamos herself couldn't know, standing in the courtyard holding a folded event schedule she no longer needed, was that the man watching from the 3rd-floor corridor had just made a decision. He hadn't made it because of the dress. He'd made it because of the way she bent to pick it up. She didn't cry. She didn't look up at the window. She shook the cobblestone dust off the chiffon carefully, folded it over her arm, and walked back inside like she had somewhere to be, like the next item on her schedule was still hers to complete. He watched her back as she disappeared through the service entrance. And then he walked away from the window and picked up his phone. Petra had been the Voss family's senior event coordinator for 7 years. She'd started at 24 as a junior assistant, brought in to manage florals and seating charts for the Voss International quarterly client dinners. She was good at it, measurably, documentably good. The kind of good that gets you promoted not because anyone decides to promote you, but because the work becomes impossible to imagine being done by anyone else. By 31, she was running every Voss family event, the corporate gala in Vienna, the charity auction in Budapest, the 70th birthday dinner for Reinhard Voss himself, which had required a venue, a catering team, a security protocol, a string quartet, and a guest list of 240 names across 11 nationalities, all coordinated in 6 weeks when the original planner had a medical emergency in October. She'd done it. The dinner ran flawlessly. Reinhard Voss had shaken her hand afterward and said, quietly, "I will not forget this." That was 3 years ago. Since then, she had coordinated 47 Voss events. She had never missed a deadline. She had never lost a vendor. She had never, in 7 years, been invited to sit at any table she set. The wedding of Marcus Voss, Reinhard's youngest son to Ilona Fair, was Petra's 48th event. The venue was the Hotel Verkert in Budapest, a renovated 19th-century palace on the Danube, with a ballroom that seated 300, and a bridal suite that cost €4,000 per night. Petra had booked both 11 months ago. She had also, at Marcus's request, stayed on site for the 4 days of pre-wedding events, the welcome dinner, the rehearsal lunch, the bridesmaid brunch, and the ceremony itself on Saturday. She had a room on the 4th floor. A single room, service rate, booked under the Voss account. Her savings balance on the morning of the bridal brunch was 43,000 forints, roughly €115. She'd been paying her mother's physiotherapy appointments since March, after the fall on the stairs in their apartment in the 8th district. 3 sessions per week. The insurance covered 60%. The 40% was Petra's. She kept a photo of her mother in the front pocket of her coordinator's folder, Erzbet Vimos, 62, laughing at something off camera, with her silver hair pinned up and her reading glasses pushed to her forehead. Petra had taken it last summer in the garden at her aunt's house in PC's. 2 weeks before the fall. Her mother did not know about the physiotherapy payments. Petra had told her the insurance covered everything. Her mother had said, "You work too hard, Kisselnyom," and Petra had changed the subject. The bridal brunch was scheduled for 11 a.m. in the hotel's private terrace salon. 20 women, 3 hours, a catered menu Petra had personally revised 4 times to accommodate Ilona's dietary requirements. She arrived at 9:45 to check the settings. The flowers, pale roses and trailing greenery, ordered from a florist in the 2nd District who'd been doing Voss events for 6 years, were arranged correctly. The seating chart was confirmed. The dietary cards were in place. At 10:55, Ilona Voss arrived with her bridal party. Ilona was 30 years old, tall, with the kind of beauty that comes with having been beautiful long enough to stop thinking about it. She walked through the salon door without looking at it and went directly to the head chair. Her bridesmaids followed her in a practiced current. Petra stood near the entrance with her coordinator's folder, ready with the day's revised timeline. "Good morning," Petra said. "Everything is set. If there are any last, you look different than your headshot," Ilona said. She had not looked up from her phone. Petra waited. "Rounder," Ilona said. She said it pleasantly, the way you might observe that it was cloudy outside. A few of the bridesmaids didn't laugh. 4 of them, Petra would count later, had looked at the floor. The rest had laughed, and Celeste, with her white blonde hair and her champagne flute, had laughed loudest. "The menu is finalized," Petra said, because she had learned a long time ago that the only way through a moment like this was through it. "If you have any questions, is that the dress you were going to wear to the ceremony?" Ilona asked. She was still not looking at her. She was scrolling. "I have a coordinator's uniform for the ceremony, yes. Show us. I'm sorry? Show us the dress. Go get it. I want to see what my coordinator is going to be wearing in my wedding photos." The corridor outside Petra's room on the 4th floor was empty when she went up to retrieve the dress. She had bought it specifically for the Voss wedding, a structured cream chiffon that hit below the knee, modest enough for a staff member, elegant enough to not embarrass the event. She had tried it on 6 times in her apartment before deciding. She had told her mother she bought it for a work function, and her mother had said it was beautiful. She brought it down in its garment bag. She carried it into the salon. She unzipped the bag. Ilona looked at it for exactly 3 seconds. "Celeste," she said. And Celeste, without hesitating, took the dress from Petra's hands, walked to the terrace doors, pushed them open, and dropped it over the railing. 3 floors. The courtyard below. "You're not coming to the ceremony," Ilona said. She had gone back to her phone. "You can handle logistics remotely. We'll manage the on-site coordination ourselves." There were 20 women in that salon. 4 of them had looked at the floor. One, a dark-haired woman named Hannah, who had been to 3 Voss events and always thanked Petra by name, had said, very quietly, "Ilona, that's," and been silenced by a look. Petra did not say anything. She zipped the empty garment bag. She said, "I'll confirm the ceremony timeline is updated." And she left. She went down the service stairs because they were faster. She went out the service entrance because it opened onto the courtyard. She found the dress on the cobblestones. She shook the dust off it, folded it over her arm, and walked back inside. What she did not know, at the end of the 3rd floor corridor, a door marked private had been opened 3 centimeters, and through that gap, a man had watched everything. His name was Nicholas Ferrer. He was 41 years old, and he had been in Budapest for 3 days on business that had nothing to do with the Voss wedding. He had arrived at the Hotel Verkert because it was secure, because he trusted the general manager, and because the east wing on the 3rd floor could be made private in 40 minutes. He had 4 rooms. His security occupied 2 of them. His assistant occupied a 3rd. Nichols used the 4th for sleeping 4 hours a night and working the remaining 20. He had seen the dress fall from the window of the terrace salon because he had been standing in the corridor outside his room with a cup of coffee, resting his eyes from the contracts he'd been reviewing since 5 a.m. He had watched a woman in a neat navy blazer walk into the courtyard, pick up a cream dress, shake the dust off it with the careful economy of someone who was not going to let this break her, and go back inside. He had stood in the corridor for another 30 seconds after she disappeared. Then, he had gone back into his room and said to his assistant, "Find out who coordinates the Voss wedding events." His assistant, a man named Daniel who had worked for him for 9 years and had learned not to ask why, had the name in 12 minutes. Petra Vimos, 31, senior event coordinator, 7 years with Voss International, on site at the hotel since Wednesday. "What's her room number?" Nichols had asked. Daniel had said, 412. Nichols had said, "Find out if she's eaten today." Petra had not eaten. She had been in the hotel since Wednesday morning, and she had eaten from the kitchen at the end of each service shift, whatever was left, whatever the kitchen staff offered when they saw her still working at 9 p.m. This was not self-deprivation. She genuinely forgot. When she was running an event, the part of her brain that tracked hunger went quiet and didn't come back until she was in bed. On Saturday morning, the day of the ceremony, the day after the bridal brunch, she was in the ballroom at 7 a.m., checking the floral arrangements when someone set a tray on the table beside her. She looked at it. Coffee. Black. Because she hadn't specified, but someone had guessed correctly. A pastry. A small plate of sliced fruit. A card under the coffee cup that read, in neat print, "The courtyard roses are doing better than the terrace ones." Someone moved the vases. Petra looked around the empty ballroom. The kitchen staff entrance was closed. There was no one visible. She looked at the card again, turned it over. Nothing on the back. She picked up the coffee. She drank it. It was exactly as hot as she wanted it. She didn't know what to make of the note about the roses, except that it was true. She'd moved the vases herself at 6:45, 10 minutes before this tray appeared, because the morning light came from the east, and the terrace arrangements were catching it wrong. She hadn't told anyone. She'd done it alone. Someone had been watching long enough to notice. She filed it away. She went back to work. She saw him for the first time at 11 a.m. She was at the coordinator's station near the ballroom entrance, running a final communication with the catering supervisor, when she became aware of someone standing at the end of the corridor. Not walking. Standing, the way that people who are used to rooms looking at them stand, without needing to announce themselves, without performing patience. She looked up. He was tall, with dark hair just beginning to go gray at the temples. He wore a suit that fit precisely, no tie, jacket buttoned. He had a phone in one hand and was not looking at it. He was looking at her. She looked back. He held her gaze for a moment, then continued down the corridor and turned left, out of sight. Her radio crackled. The catering supervisor had a question about the champagne service order. She answered it. She went back to work. She did not think about him again until two things happened in quick succession that afternoon, and by then it was too late not to think about everything else. The ceremony was set for 3 p.m. At 2:40, Ilona had descended the bridal staircase in a gown that cost more than Petra's annual salary and had looked spectacular and known it. The guests were seated. The florist's roses were correct. The string quartet from Vienna, the one Petra had contracted 8 months ago and confirmed 3 times since, was tuned and ready. Petra stood in the coordinator's alcove behind the ballroom's east pillar with her earpiece and her folder, and watched everything she had built run the way she had planned it. At 2:58, Reinhard Voss appeared at her elbow. He was 73. He had the build of a man who had been physically imposing for most of his life and had settled into a kind of retired authority. He looked at the ballroom, then at Petra. "It's beautiful," he said. "Thank you," she said. I meant what I said, he said. 3 years ago. I don't forget. She didn't know what to say to that. She said, "The ceremony starts in 2 minutes." He smiled, the quiet smile of a man who is used to being redirected, and went to take his seat. At 3 o'clock, the string quartet began. At 3 o'clock and 4 seconds, Petra noticed that the man from the corridor, Nichols, though she didn't know his name yet, was not seated with the guests. He was standing in the east gallery above the ballroom, one hand on the railing, watching, not the ceremony. The ceremony was below him, and to his left. He was watching Petra. She felt it the way you feel sunlight shift, not a sound, not a movement, just a change in what was landing on you. She kept her eyes on her folder. She did not look up. The reception began at 6. By 7:30, the toasts were done, the first course was cleared, and the dancing had started, and Petra was in the service corridor behind the kitchen doing a final equipment check with the catering crew, when Daniel, though she didn't know his name either, not yet, appeared at the corridor entrance and said, "Miss, vamos." She turned. "Miss Ferrer would like a word when you have a moment." She looked at him. "Mr. Ferrer, yes, I'm sorry. Is he a guest of the Voss family?" "He's a guest of the hotel," Daniel said, which was not an answer to her question, and they both knew it. "He says it won't take long." She was behind schedule on the equipment check. The orchestra's contract ran until midnight, and she needed to confirm the midnight extension before 10. She had 3 items on her checklist that weren't done. She said 10 minutes, because 7 years of event coordination had taught her that the things that asked for 10 minutes were usually the things you regretted not giving 10 minutes to. He was waiting in a small room off the east corridor, a private sitting room that the hotel maintained for exactly this kind of meeting, the kind where someone needed to speak without being in a ballroom. He was standing at the window when she came in. He turned when she entered. Up close, he was harder to read than she'd expected. Not cold. Something more careful than cold. The eyes of someone who had learned to listen before speaking and had been doing it for so long it had become his natural register. "Petra Vimos," he said. "Yes, Nichols Ferrer." He didn't extend a hand immediately. He said, "Sit down if you'd like." She did not sit. She said, "I understand you wanted to speak with me. I saw what happened yesterday," he said. In the courtyard, she felt the air in the room change slightly. Not from anything he did, from something she did, the small internal bracing that happened every time the thing from yesterday was referenced, the same brace you do for a bruise you've forgotten and then someone touches it. "That's not something I need addressed," she said. "It's not. I'm not here to address it," he said. "I'm here to tell you that Marcus Voss called me this morning to inform me the wedding is canceled." She looked at him. "Marcus Voss is a client of mine," Nichols said. "A secondary client. He uses one of my parent holding companies for certain import permits in the Adriatic. He called at 7 a.m. to say the wedding would not proceed as planned and that he was sorry for the late notice." He paused. "I didn't ask why. I looked into it myself. The wedding is—" She stopped. She recalibrated. "The ceremony happened at 3 o'clock. They're at the reception now." "The ceremony happened," he said. Marcus signed the civil registry and immediately left the building. He is currently at a hotel in the 2nd District. He called off the marriage approximately 40 minutes after the ceremony concluded. He said it without inflection, the way you state a fact that doesn't require editorial. He cited the events of yesterday morning as the reason he had changed his mind. Petra was quiet for a long moment. "His exact words to me," Nichols said, were, "I watched what Alona did, and I realized I was watching who she actually is. I am telling you this because you should know it had nothing to do with me. I did not speak to Marcus Voss. I made no calls on your behalf." I watched you walk back through that door with your dress over your arm, and I thought about it. And then I did nothing, because it was not my business to do anything. Then why are you telling me this? She said. He looked at her steadily. Because tomorrow morning you'll be managing the aftermath of a canceled wedding in a hotel that is in your name professionally, and I wanted you to know before you walked out of this room that the thing that went wrong here was not you. She didn't say anything for a moment. She was doing the math she always did in a crisis, running the checklist of what needed to happen, in what order, who she needed to call, what the contract clauses said about cancellation. Vendors, the florist, the catering team, the orchestra still playing 40 meters away. You coordinate events under pressure as a reflex, Nichols said. It wasn't a question. He was observing. It's what I do, she said. I know. He paused. My company has an event coordination contract that expires at the end of this year. The person who holds it is competent. She is not remarkable. He looked at her with the direct attention of someone who had decided something and was informing her of it as a courtesy. I would like to offer you the position. The salary is 4 times what Voss pays you. The contract allows for independent client work. You would travel, primarily Vienna, Barcelona, Milan. You would have full logistical authority on every event. She stared at him. You're offering me a job. Yes, you've known me for. She glanced at her watch without meaning to. 9 minutes. I've been watching you run this event for 3 days, he said. I've watched how you move through a problem. I watched you yesterday. A pause. You moved the roses this morning. She looked at him. I noticed the vases were wrong when I passed the ballroom at 6:30, he said. You'd already fixed them by the time I came back. You didn't tell anyone. You just fixed it. He let a beat pass. I need someone who fixes things before they become problems and doesn't need to be thanked for it. She was quiet. Outside, through the walls, she could hear the orchestra. The piece they were on was Satie. She'd specified it for the cocktail hour transition, and it had carried into the reception, soft and unhurried. I have to go tell 300 people that the wedding they came to celebrate is over, she said. Yes, he said. I know. And then I have to call 11 vendors and navigate 3 separate cancellation clauses and get the florist deposit returned and write a report for Reinhard Voss. Yes. And you want an answer tonight. I don't need an answer tonight, he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and set a card on the table between them. I need you to have a way to reach me. The answer can wait. She picked up the card. She looked at it for a moment. She set it in the front pocket of her coordinator's folder, behind the photo of her mother. I need to go back, she said. I know. She went to the door. At the door, she stopped. The coffee this morning, she said. She didn't phrase it as a question because she already knew the answer. The kitchen was going to send pastries, he said. I told them black coffee instead. She stood there for another second. Then she left. The next 4 hours were the most operationally complex of Petra's professional life. Reinhard Voss came to her at 9 p.m. with the look of a man who had just spoken to his son and was holding himself together through long practice. Marcus has explained, he said, quietly. He asked me to convey his apology to you personally. I'll need guidance on how to handle the announcement, Petra said. Handle it however you think is right, Reinhard said. I trust your judgment. She handled it. She pulled the orchestra conductor aside at 9:15 and had a quiet conversation. She gathered the catering supervisor and gave instructions. She drafted a 2-sentence statement that was read aloud by the maitre d' at 9:30 to a ballroom of 300 confused and murmuring guests. And the statement was so tactful and so calm and so completely lacking in blame that 20 people came to find Petra afterward to tell her it was the most gracious thing they'd ever heard at what was obviously a catastrophe. Alona had left the ballroom by 9:20, Celeste and 3 bridesmaids in her wake, and she did not find Petra before she left, which was for the best. At 11:45, Petra stood in the empty ballroom and looked at 300 place settings, 2,000 roses, and a cake that served 400. The cleaning crew was waiting at the door. The florist was coming in the morning to reclaim the arrangements. The orchestra had packed up an hour ago and left with their payment in full per the contract clause Petra had quoted correctly from memory. She was very tired. She heard a step behind her and turned. Nichols stood at the ballroom entrance. He was still in his suit. He had a cup of coffee in each hand. The kitchen was closing, he said. I asked them to make one more. She looked at him for a moment. Then she walked across the ballroom to where he was standing, took one of the cups, and drank. You built this, he said, looking at the ballroom. I planned it, she said. It was different from building. What's the difference? She thought about it. Building is permanent, she said. Planning is hoping something holds long enough to look like it was always going to work. He looked at her. Does it ever hold? Tonight, it held until 9:30, she said. That's longer than I expected. Something shifted in his expression, not a smile exactly, but the precondition for one. In my experience, he said, 9:30 is usually where everything interesting starts. They stood in the ballroom in the quiet. The roses were still there, pale in the dimmed overhead light. The place settings caught the glow from the chandelier's lowest setting, 120 tiny reflections in the silver. My mother's physiotherapy, Petra said. She hadn't planned to say it. It came out because she was tired, and the coffee was warm, and the room was empty, and there was something about him that made deflection feel like more effort than honesty. I've been paying 40% since March. Insurance doesn't cover all of it. He was quiet. He didn't say I'm sorry, or that must be hard, or any of the things that would have required her to reassure him. How many sessions per week? He said. 3, and she doesn't know you're paying. No, why not? She thought about it. Because she would tell me to stop, she said. And I don't want to stop. He considered this. You've been doing this alone for 7 months, he said. Yes, and you are going to keep doing it alone. Yes, I understand that, he said. Very simply, the way he said most things. And then, for what it's worth, the salary I quoted you would cover the physiotherapy with money to spare. I'm not saying it as a reason. I'm saying it because you should know the number is real. She looked at him. You're a strange man, she said. I know, he said. You watched me pick a dress off cobblestones and decided to offer me a job. I watched you pick a dress off cobblestones and not look up at the window, he said. That was the part. She was quiet. The dignity you kept, he said, in a room where no one was keeping it for you. I need someone who can do that. In my work, there are rooms where everyone is waiting to see if you'll break. You don't break. He paused. That's rare. She looked at the ballroom, at the roses, at the chandelier catching in the silver. I'll give you an answer by Wednesday, she said. He nodded. No pressure. No performance of patience. The job is yours when you want it, he said. What happened to Alona Fair in the weeks after the Voss wedding is the kind of story that travels quietly through the social circles that matter, and loudly through everyone else. Marcus Voss filed for a formal annulment the following Tuesday on grounds that the marriage had not been consummated. His attorneys handled it through channels so established and so quiet that no journalist picked it up for 3 weeks. When it did emerge, the account that circulated, the accurate one, described what had happened at the bridal brunch. The dress, the courtyard, and Marcus watching the reception footage he'd requested from the hotel's security system the night of the ceremony. The footage existed because Petra had contracted the hotel security team as part of the standard event documentation package, which was in the Voss file, which Marcus reviewed. The Fair family's investment partnership with Voss International, a €12 million arrangement in commercial real estate, was allowed to expire without renewal at the end of the quarter. No reason was given. None was needed. Celeste, whose surname was Varga, and who worked in marketing at a mid-size Budapest firm that held 2 Voss accounts, found both accounts transferred to a competitor by the 1st of October. Again, no reason was given. Petra did not know any of this when it happened. She was in Vienna. She had called Nichols on Tuesday, one day ahead of Wednesday, because she had spent Sunday and Monday running cancellation logistics for the Voss wedding, filing her report with Reinhard, and sitting with her mother on Monday evening in the apartment in the 8th District with tea and the television on low. Her mother's hand warm and dry over hers on the sofa cushion. Her mother had fallen asleep at 9. Petra had looked at her for a long moment in the lamplight, the silver hair, the reading glasses pushed to her forehead, the lines around her eyes that had deepened since March. She had gone home and called Nichols. He had answered on the second ring. She had said, yes. He had said, good. She had said, I have conditions. He had said, tell me. She had told him. She needed 2 weeks to transition out of the Voss role with integrity. She needed the contract to allow 2 weeks of remote work per month so she could be in Budapest for her mother. She needed full logistical authority on events, which meant no second guessing in the field. She needed the salary confirmed in writing. He had said, 2 weeks is generous and also correct. I'll have Daniel draft the transition framework. 2 weeks Budapest per month is standard in the contract. Full logistical authority is non-negotiable, which means I won't touch it. The salary is confirmed. It was always confirmed. She had been quiet for a moment. One more thing, she said. Yes, the roses this morning, she said. The card. Yes, someone told you I'd moved them. No, he said. I was in the ballroom at 6:30. I saw you do it. She thought about that. About him standing in the ballroom at 6:30 a.m., while she adjusted vases in the east light and didn't look up. Why were you in the ballroom? She said. A pause. I was looking for you, he said, very simply. She sat with that for a moment in her quiet apartment. Wednesday, she said, not Tuesday. You called on Tuesday, he said. I know, she said. I changed my mind. I know, he said. And she could hear, for the first time, the precondition for a smile, not just in his expression, but in his voice. She left for Vienna on a Wednesday morning in late September, with one suitcase, her coordinator's folder, and a photo of her mother in the front pocket. The apartment in the 8th District was not sublet. She had taken the 2 weeks per month clause and put it in the contract in ink, which meant the apartment needed to stay ready. Erzbet Famos's physiotherapy now ran 3 sessions a week, covered fully, billed through a health administration account Petra had not been asked to explain, and had not asked to explain. When she told her mother finally about the physiotherapy payments, all 7 months of them, her mother had said nothing for a very long time. Then, she had said, Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have told me to stop, Petra said. I would have told you to stop, her mother agreed. And I would have been wrong. She had held Petra's hand in both of hers. You worked too hard, Kisselnoam, I know, Petra said. I'm going to work very hard somewhere else for a while. Her mother had laughed, that specific laugh from the photograph, the one caught off camera, the one that made her eyes close completely. Petra had taken a new photograph, Not for the folder. For herself. She arrived in Vienna on a morning when the city was fully autumn, the Ringstrasse under ginkgo leaves going gold, the Danube somewhere beyond the buildings catching the early light. The hotel Nichols had arranged was on the Schubertring, a 19th century building with a courtyard, which she noticed, and then noticed that she'd noticed. He was waiting in the lobby, not performing patience, just present. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she said. He looked at her for a moment with the attention of someone who had been paying attention to her since a September Saturday when he'd been standing in a corridor with a cup of coffee resting his eyes from contracts, and he said, "Did you sleep?" "On the train," she said. "That's not sleeping. It's close enough," she said. He almost smiled. "The first meeting is at 10. You have an hour and 40 minutes. He handed her a coffee. Black, correctly hot. "The East roses are fine," he said. "I checked." She looked at him. "There are no roses yet," she said. "We haven't started planning." "I know," he said. "But when there are, they'll be fine. I'll make sure of it." She took the coffee. She held it in both hands. Outside, through the lobby's tall windows, Vienna went on in its gold October light. The trams, the awnings, the pedestrians moving with the particular purposefulness of a city that has been doing this for a very long time and intends to go on doing it. It was a city that did not care whether you were invisible or seen, whether you were mocked or not, whether your dress fell 3 floors or was folded perfectly in a garment bag. She cared. She had always cared, and she had always done it alone. She stood in the lobby with a coffee in her hands, and a meeting in an hour and 40 minutes, and the first event of her new professional life still unmapped and unmade. Just a clean page, just the beginning. And she thought about a courtyard in Budapest and a woman who had bent to pick something up and not looked at the window above her and walked back inside. And she thought. She knew, long before this lobby, long before Vienna, long before Nichols Ferrer had said the salary is confirmed, it was always confirmed. She had known what she was worth. She just hadn't had a room yet that was worth the same thing. Now she did. She drank the coffee. She opened her folder to the first clean page. "Show me the event file," she said. He handed it to her. She started reading. "If Petra's story stayed with you, the kind of quiet that holds when everything around it breaks, you already know why. Tell me in the comments, when did you first know she wasn't going to look up at that window? That's the moment. I want to know which one it was for you. If this is the kind of story you come here for, the ones where the dignity was there first, before anyone saw it, follow along. New story every day. And one more thing. Nichols has a son. He's 14, and he lives in Barcelona, and he knows his father's voice very well from phone calls, but not from the same room. What happens when Petra meets him? Drop it in the comments if you want to find out. I'll be reading every one.